The Zika virus was first discovered in the Zika forest in Uganda and is now suspected of being the cause of abnormally small heads in Brazilian babies and Guillain-Barré syndrome, a dangerous autoimmune dysfunction. The Aedes mosquito, a vector for dengue and chikungunya, is able to transmit the Zika virus, which was first isolated from a rhesus macaque monkey in 1947. It is known to cause symptoms like fever, rash, joint pain, or conjunctivitis, but the illness is usually mild, and 1 in 5 people infected with the virus will fall sick. Margaret Chan, the Director General of the World Health Organization, issued a statement saying that the Zika virus was
spreading explosively,
and
the level of alarm is extremely high.
Furthermore, she was quoted saying,
"A causal relationship between Zika virus infection and birth malformations and neurological syndromes has not yet been established." This is a very important point. But it is strongly suspected.
As such, there isn't much evidence pointing to babies having small heads, a condition called microcephaly, and the Zika virus. This hasn't stopped the media from pushing the possibility of an all-out epidemic despite lack of substantial evidence. Even though the virus has been around for some time now, appearing in the year 1969 in our own backyard. In fact, Malaysians are advised to take measures ranging from postponing travel to 24 countries in the Americas, protecting themselves against mosquito bites, and destroying Aedes mosquito breeding grounds. According to Professor Dr. Sazali Abu Bakar, the World Health Organization's Collaborating Center for Arbovirus Reference and Research Director, the size of an outbreak possibly amplified the otherwise rare occurrence of microcephaly. El Salvador has advised women to delay pregnancy until 2018, while Brazil has acted more drastically, with over 200,000 soldiers being sent to spread awareness of the Zika virus on February 13th, and Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff calling for war on the Zika-carrying mosquitoes and authorizing health officials to enter private properties by force if necessary in an effort to control the spread of the virus. While the active response taken by the respective governments show that there is heightened awareness of the previously unheard of virus, the numbers do not seem to warrant such action. Global Post ran an article titled "The Sketchy Numbers Behind Brazil's Zika Crisis," citing a report by the journal Nature, which concluded that the apparent spike in babies with small heads is probably due to active search and overdiagnosis. It turns out that out of the 4,000 cases of suspected microcephaly, Brazil has confirmed 270 actual cases since October 2015. A bulletin from Brazil's health ministry states that only 6 of the country's reported cases of microcephaly are related to the Zika virus. Furthermore, 462 of the suspected microcephaly cases have been discarded, so cases are being discarded at almost twice the rate they're being confirmed. The article closes with this sentence: "There is not enough accurate data yet to show that there is something the global public, or specifically expecting mothers in Latin America, should be panicking about." The World Health Organization has called the situation a global health emergency. This will be the 4th time the World Health Organization declared such an emergency, with the previous 3 times being the outbreak of swine flu or H1N1 in 2009, the apparent resurgence of polio in 2014, and Ebola later the same year. As there is no known cure, pharmaceutical companies are already working on a vaccine to the Zika virus, whether or not it spreads out of control. A sexually transmitted case has been reported in the US and is yet to be proven. Brazil has allowed this year's Rio Olympics to go on despite the risks. Already, speculations about genetically modified mosquitoes created by British company Aussitech, funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, spreading the Zika virus, and the Tdap vaccine causing microcephaly instead of the virus have surfaced, the former originating from a Reddit post, while the latter from a blog. Although both theories present compelling evidence, they do not seem to hold much water, for the moment at least. The conspiratorial side of the argument also raises the question of the ownership of the Zika virus, with what appears to be a patent of the Zika virus from ATCC, a company that touted itself as the premier global biological materials resource and standards organization. The depositor of the virus, it seems, is the Rockefeller Foundation. With so much hype surrounding the Zika virus, the recent swine flu cases in Russia barely get any media coverage. If we ever learn anything after all the buzz over the Zika virus has died down, it has to be the fact that the
Zika found in saliva and urine, warns the propagandists at the BRICS Post. U.S. athletes should consider skipping Rio if they fear Zika, chides Rothschild's Reuters. Zika prompts urgent debate about abortion in Latin America, rejoices the Washington Post. And the Australian Broadcasting Corporation tells us, Zika virus, Brazilian survey calls into question cause of microcephaly? Oh, yes, exactly as we were talking about on the program last week with John Rappaport. Yes, it turns out that the Zika microcephaly connection has been vastly overblown, in fact created out of whole cloth. Why, I never. Thank you to the observant listener who sent this link in via email on the Corbett Report contact form. And yes, this relates to Dr. Sandra Matos, a pediatric cardiologist in Brazil who has a handy-dandy database coming from the 100,000 newborns that she's treated over the last few years for congenital heart disease in the Brazilian state of Paraíba. And wow, wouldn't you know it, she has all of this data, length, weight, and head circumference of these newborns, which you might recognize as the indicator, not the inditer, the indicator for microcephaly. And with that knowledge, what did she find? They were expecting to find 3 to 4 cases a year of microcephaly, but what they actually found was that between 2 to 8% of the babies in this database would fall into the criteria of microcephaly. That translates into 2,000 to 4,000 babies per year in this one state alone, i.e. 1,000 times more than they were expecting. Now, this goes back to 2012, so it has nothing whatsoever to do with the Zika outbreak from last fall that they're trying to pin the blame of this supposed recent surge of microcephaly on, although, again, as we talked about last week, out of the 4,700-odd reported cases, only 400 have been confirmed so far, and only 17 have been quote-unquote associated with Zika virus. So there's a whole lot of smoke going on with a whole little fire. And yes, again, there's absolutely no connection that has been made between Zika virus and microcephaly, and in fact, there's growing evidence that there is no connection. And for more elaboration on this, I will once again direct you to John Rappaport's blog. You might have seen his latest post, Who Launched the Fake Epidemic story in Brazil, talking about the World Health Organization. He does a good job of breaking down their actual press release on their emergency committee meeting that they held late last month, and he goes through it and deciphers the wording, the associated with. Zika has been associated with a steep increase in the birth of babies with abnormally small heads, although an actual connection has not been established, but close enough. And they go on, of course, to laud themselves and their various offices around Latin America and around the world for keeping such great control over the situation and blah, blah, blah. So, yes, the WHO only has the hammer of being able to declare a pandemic, and lo and behold, every time that there's any chance for them to do so, whether it's swine flu or Ebola or now Zika, they will do so, and they will come down with their hammer on mosquitoes. So we've seen, of course, the Brazilian army going to house in their valiant fight against these mosquitoes. And the WHO, of course, declaring its public health emergency of international concern, which activates all of the medical martial law apparatus, which they can or don't have to use in any given event, and which could go all the way up to escalation, all the way into the realm of NATO boots on the ground in whatever country they deem fit. I don't think that's going to happen this time, but it is part of what they can actually do with the PHEIC, as we documented last year in our open source investigation on Ebola. And now the next shoe is dropping. We have the CDC now activating their highest emergency operations level. That's level 1 emergency in the wake of this spread of Zika virus. It might be reaching the United States. Oh no, and you might come down with some sniffles and maybe a rash for 2 to 7 days, and it will go away naturally because there's no way to treat it, because it's like the common cold. But there you go. I mean, this is what people are freaking out about because the media is telling them to, and so of course, as a logical extension, Obama is now asking Congress for emergency funding to combat Zika. How much funding? $1.8 billion. And what are they going to do with that? They're going to expand mosquito control programs. They're going to develop diagnostic tests, improve support for low-income pregnant women. That doesn't seem like $1.8 billion. Oh, they're going to speed develop a vaccine. Ping pong, ching ching, there it is. All that money going injected right into the arm of Big Pharma. Surprise, surprise. So, yes, this is playing out exactly as predicted. Absolutely no surprise there. And so people, well, I hope no one in my audience is freaking out about this, but if you do know anyone who is freaking out, perhaps you can direct them to some of these resources, which of course I will link up in the show notes for today's episode. Thank you to the observant listener who sent this article in from the ABC, and another listener who sent in a good take on this $1.8 billion of funding that they're throwing at this right now. Compare that to the $3 million that the 9/11 Commission was initially funded with, i.e. 1/500th the amount of money that they're now throwing at this non-existent pandemic that's not going to kill anybody. They're throwing 500 times more money around than they did at the 9/11 Commission. But don't worry, of course, they did ultimately give another $9 million to the 9/11 Commission. So it ended up with $12 million. Wow. To investigate, the biggest